You're listening to the Options Insider Radio Network, the home of the Options Podcast. For more quality options programs, visit theoptionsinsider.com or search for Options Insider Radio Network in your podcast provider of choice. Listeners can also access all of our programming through our mobile app available in the iTunes and Google Play stores. Select programs are also available via live stream at mixlr.com/options-insider. That's mixlr.com/options-insider. Don't forget to follow along with your favorite programs and submit your own questions for the hosts at twitter.com/options, stocktwits.com/options, facebook.com/theoptionsinsider, or via questions at theoptionsinsider.com. Welcome to Volatility Views, the premier program for volatility traders. Each week, we'll take a deep dive into the world of volatility with in-depth analysis, trading activity reviews, strategy breakdowns, cutting-edge education, and much more. We'll also bring you exclusive conversations with the traders, researchers, and asset managers who are reshaping the volatility landscape. If it involves volatility, then you'll find it on Volatility Views. Volatility Views is brought to you by MIAX, one of the fastest, most efficient trading platforms in the world. MIAX is proud to bring you Spikes Volatility products. Spikes options and futures are traded on the Spikes Volatility Index, SPIKE, offering pinpoint accuracy, radically faster dissemination, and a highly transparent settlement auction, all for ultra-low exchange fees. It's volatility reimagined. Learn more about Spikes at miaxoptions.com/spikes. Options and futures involve risk and are not suitable for all investors. The statements made are provided for informational purposes only and should not be relied on for financial or legal advice. Volatility Views is also brought to you by Matrix Executions, LLC, an agency broker-dealer focused on best execution in trading workflow automation. A technology-driven firm, Matrix is led by trading pioneers with decades of experience designing and building best-in-class solutions for options markets. Matrix connects to all domestic exchange venues and multiple international exchanges and serves both institutional and individual clients. For more information on Matrix Executions, LLC, please visit matrixexecutions.com. And now, it's time to take a deep dive into the world of volatility. It's time for Volatility Views.
All right, everybody. That music can mean only one thing. The moment you have been waiting for all week has arrived. It is Friday. It is noon Central. It is 1 p.m. Eastern. It is time to break down this insane week of volatility. Yes, it is time for Volatility Views. My name is Mark Longo from the OptionsInsider.com, as well as, of course, from the ever-exciting Options Insider Radio Network. Reminding you, while you're waiting for the show all week, hopefully you're checking out our other shows on the network, close to a dozen of them there. And hopefully you like what you hear and you're leaving those ratings and reviews wherever you get the shows: Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, Audible, Podbean, wherever the heck you get it. We don't judge. Keep rating and reviewing. If you get it via our app, then of course, like people like to leave reviews in the App Store, whatever you like to do. It does help all the new folks continue to discover the content. And clearly, a week like this is a reminder that they need some help navigating these crazy waters. Well, we're here for you. We'll get through all this together. And let's see who we're going to hear from on the old program today. First, let's go out to the MIAX hot seat, where we are joined once again by Mr. Tom JARCK, the Vice President of Proprietary Product Development. Ooh, new title over there at MIAX. Tom, welcome back to the program. So you're no longer the volatility product specialist, sir.
Hey, Mark. Hey, everybody. Thanks for having me on again. And no longer the volatility specialist, but I keep that in my back pocket because I still feel like I have some knowledge on the topic.
You'll always be the specialist to me, sir.
But yeah, I was, I've been consulting for MIAX for the past, a little over a year, and it came time to make some decisions, and we both agreed to bring me on full time as in the product development area. So yeah, it's been good. I'm really happy about it, and good group of folks, as you know, to work with, and a lot to build on.
A lot to build on, indeed. And let's see what they're building on way out there in the hinterlands of Maine, because we are joined once again by the rockingest of lobsters, Mr. Andrew GIOVINAZZI from OptionPit.com, by way of his palatial-like fortress there on the dark and stormy shores of Maine. Mr. Rock Lobster, welcome back to the program. I got a feeling you're like me. You probably got a little bit of a smile on your face today, sir.
I do. I feel like I backed in. Like, you don't normally get, you don't. Yes, I got a smile. We'll talk about it later. But the normally grumpy Rock Lobster is less grumpy today.
It takes a lot to put a smile on that man's face. So let's get to it. Let's figure out why. It is time for the Volatility Review.
It's time to break down the latest developments in the volatility trading world. It's time for the Volatility Review.
All right, everybody, let's do it. Time for the Vol Review, the portion of the show where we break down the week that was and indeed still is from a trading and trending and analysis and unusual activity across the broad spectrum of volatility products. And man, the markets are feeling their feeling their gusto today. All of the major indices firmly in the green. Let's start with the laggard, the Dow, only up a meager 1%. Then you got S&P up, closing in on 1.5%, pretty close to it. And you got NASDAQ just feeling its oats, back up 2%. People were wondering for a while there earlier in the week, were we going to break 4,000 in the S&P? Is it going to happen? And then now, spoiler alert, back up the other side. But what a tumultuous week it has been, listeners. We've been saying it for a while. It's one of the things that has complicated the crystal ball for the better part of the past couple of months is we have, in aggregate, mostly a vol sell-off, vol kind of mitigating itself, vol coming in. But we have these moments, these spikes, pun intended, where vol outperforms aggressively to the upside. And the question that is on everyone's mind is, how aggressively will it outperform? B, kind of the $1,000,000 question, quite literally in this sense, is how long will that outperformance last? Usually it's very short-lived. And so we've said it many times, you have a handful of moments, usually, maybe an hour or two if you're lucky, to really capture the apex of that move before vol turns right back around again and starts roaring back to the downside. We didn't see that this week. We saw, of course, aggressive sell-off coming into the earlier week on Tuesday. And then I think what caught a lot of people by surprise was the second leg of the sell-off. That's what really spooked people the next day, where the markets continued to sell off, vol continued to rally. I know for a fact that caught a lot of people kind of flat-footed because said, wait a minute, they got their fades in at the end of the first day of sell-off because it passed as prologue. That was the way it's supposed to play out. And so a little bit of craziness afoot here on the week and on the markets, a lot to parse. Let's start out since he's smiling, it's such a rare thing that he's happy. But I know in the past, he's had trouble getting his puts off. Today, he's got them all on and he's smiling. Mr. Rock Lobster, a crazy, tumultuous week. Walk us through what it's been like for you and for Volman, and why are you both smiling today?
Yes, well, Volman early in the week, he did put a little thing out with massive ramp in VXX vol early. What was it, Wednesday? It's hard for me to tell anymore. What is today's Friday, Thursday? So I'm going to say Tuesday, massive ramp Tuesday. Usually when they ramp the vol that hard in the short term in the vol products, it's like, danger Will Rogers. And it was really hard to really see why there was so much worry, but it nonetheless appeared. And so we had a crazy ramp in vol. I think we had from a 16 to a 27 and change VIX this week, 10 points, just flying. And we had yesterday one of those rare days where SPX really was not selling off, or not yesterday, Thursday, Wednesday. SPX was selling off, but nowhere near the ramp in VIX, which is usually I think it's kind of more of a symptom of the modern, maybe Tom can talk about this, but the modern like electronic liquidity provider where like they just jack that vol up fast and say, come get it. There's no, you can look at the real-time tick charts for vol of the options, and they're just like parabolic straight up. And if I was a liquidity provider and I'm putting up electronic markets, I'd get that crap up really fast too. So I think they're going to err on the side of making options too expensive, right? Because that's an easy problem. Because usually we have some pretty decent moves. Now we had probably 150 handle move from the bottom to the top already. So I think the vol was priced right, because you have almost you have like a 3.5-4% move over a couple days, up and down. So that was crazy. So basically, long story short, you had a one day where you had vol VIX literally go straight up, and like it was very odd all day long. It was a pretty steady bid, and so that was actually one of the easier days to manage the long vol calls, because you could put a stop in the morning and offer in the afternoon and just watch and don't have to do anything, because it just basically went one direction, which doesn't always happen like that. But so it was a good opportunity. As you know, you have to sell your calls when the vol is bid in VIX. I try to leave a little bit on, but a day like yesterday or a day like Wednesday, when you have like a 3 or 4 standard deviation move or something like that, I'm going to dump 90% of what I own, which I did. So now, and I thought the puts were dead, right? I thought, vol's going to go. We're going to see 35 VIX this week. And we didn't. I have no idea what changed the tone. I didn't see anything, actually. We talked about it yesterday. Actually, I thought the tone got worse because people were getting out of Bitcoin because Elon Musk changed his mind on the environmental friendliness of that particular coin. So, again, strange confluence of stuff. I'm not totally sure this is over, to be honest. This vol event. I mean, we are down to 19 VIX already, so we've erased 3/4 of the move up. And then today I'm just getting rid of some of the puts that I own because they're paying for them. So, but that's the environment we have. Really, really, it's just amazing how fast VIX snaps up. And I don't know if it is a symptom of like the Fed getting in the markets and all this liquidity swashing around, but things move fast and you got to take your money. And that's kind of where I am with what the market is. But it wouldn't surprise me on Monday if VIX was 25 or 16, to be honest, at this point. That's where I am. I think if there's a range, it's going to be big still.
It does seem like it is poised for those moves, right? Again, we've always talked about VIX, and one of the things that VIX and spikes and all the vol products have excelled at is outperforming to the upside, and that's what makes them desirable to a lot of people out there. Yet in this environment, it does seem, you're right, much more extreme, much more aggressive than it is normally, and plays out much more rapid pace than perhaps we're used to seeing out there. Tom, a lot going on. Interesting time to be hanging your hat in the world of volatility over there in the land of MIAX. I know you traded in the vol space for a long time before you dove into the exchange world. So obviously a lot of vol on the screen this week across the board. What was catching your eye this week, sir?
Well, so yeah, definitely a pretty whippy week. A couple things that I noticed, as far as what was just said about, the markets on Monday, where we're going to be, but the gap opening that we saw on Monday, we haven't really filled that gap yet. From I'm not a technical analyst, but I do usually like to see that before I get a little more comfortable with things. So, but they've taken this vol up very fast and taken it right back down. It almost seemed like on Wednesday on the lows, it's almost like a program just went through, and it was overnight basically for the next day, where it was just like, all right, everything's okay again. And I mean, literally the market bounced back and the vol retracement was pretty quick. And, I was quite intrigued by that. And you did see on Wednesday, most of the day, especially later in the day, in the VIX products, there was a lot of call spread selling. I think there was like a June 50-60 call spread that was sold out, pretty good size. I mean, we're going to talk about some of the trades later, but so it seemed like there was monetizing of the vol spike, as well as just the overall, the next, on Thursday, that big move on the opening, just to the market's moving higher. So I would imagine there was also some, I wasn't really following the flows in the index side as much, or in the SPYs on Wednesday, but I would imagine there was also a lot of selling of hedges and puts as well, which is going to erase some of that vol move as well. The move with the vol indices, whether it's the hidden V spikes, or whether it's VVIX, there's that move is pretty incredible from high to low on the week. So there's definitely a lot of interesting things going on out there. Next week we have settlement coming up on the VIX and the spikes options and futures. Just definitely an interesting week overall.
Definitely an interesting week, interesting show. I got so interested in it all at the top of the show, I forgot to break down where we are from a vol perspective. Coming in at the start of the show, of course, we had spikes at about a 19.5. That's up about only 1.5 points. So look at all the tumult, all the topsy-turviness we've seen over the course of the past week, listeners. And net, we're only up 1.5 points. It was a lot higher not that long ago. Listen, let's go over to MIAXoptions.com/spike to see exactly where spikes topped out at 27.76, listeners. So we are well below that right now, to put it mildly. VIX cash coming in the start of the show is at about exactly a 19 handle. That puts it up about 1 3/4 points from last show. But yet again, well below the high that we saw not too long. I got up to about similar level, about 27.70 or so in VIX cash. So both of these well off their highs we saw a couple of sessions ago. VVIX, of course, it's going to be frothy. It's going to be topsy-turvy because we're seeing some vol again. These products are moving like little biotechs now. They're swinging all over the place. VVIX is back up to that pandemic floor we used to have before of around 120. That's pretty much, we were north of that for most of the pandemic era. We got below it for a little while. Now we're back up exactly at 120, up 14 points from where we were this time last week. Of course, this time last week, remember, we were coming off the heels of that just atrocious, horrible jobs number. And yet the markets were exploding north. And so here we are. We find ourselves 1 week later exploding north yet again. Also on the heels of some weak numbers coming out there. Some folks on the TWIFO program yesterday from RGO made an interesting point. I thought we were talking about volatility all the time. They think going forward, the volatility of economic data may be a big driver. And that's not something we ever really considered before. Maybe we need a new Greek to calculate that, but that's certainly something we're seeing. It's certainly between the delta between the predictions and the actual numbers are getting much larger these days. And that interim, that volatility, that period in between those goalposts there is going to drive a lot of action going forward. And certainly we have been seeing that already and probably going to see that for a little while to come. Let's head on out to VIX futures land. Coming into the start of the show, we had the May future pretty much equidistant to the cash. It was about a 0.2 of a point or so, not even distant to the cash. That brings it almost 1.5 points lower. Getting ready to go the way of the dodo there with that May contract. June to about almost 2.5 points, about 2.4 points premium to the cash. That brings it back up about 2.1 points higher than it was this time last week. So getting a little bit of evolution in the front portion of that curve. Mr. Rock Lobster, interesting times out there. We are still plateauing out there in that October contract, a little higher than we were last week. This week it's about 24.5, but we do still have that same plateau shape later on in the curve. It seems like the front portion is where we're getting most of the action these days. Anything catching your eye from a VIX futures perspective this week, sir?
Well, besides the crazy move that we
was there a crazy move? I wasn't paying attention. Did something happen?
I was trying to. I think right now, when you look at it, the curve is starting to look kind of normalish, except for there's still like that front end. The front end of the term is still reflecting the fact that we had pretty much really big moves lately, just the May contract. Because it's laying right on the cash. So it's basically the market's still like, still not, again, from a, like how, because the curve looks like it does, the front end is like, how much do people want to pay for that short-term vol? So there's still that bid for the short-term vol is still there. The short-term, like I would say, the shorter-term SPX contracts, the 30-day contracts. So so it's there. It hasn't totally gone away yet, but also I'm looking at it, but only 30 points away from 4,200, right? I'm trying to look. And I find it quite extraordinary. So let's see here. So I think Monday at this time, where were we? Let's say the 10th. And yeah, so Monday at this time, the October contract was 24.30, and today the October contract is actually 24.25. So, like as you said,
so we've done nothing all week, sir. It's been an empty, boring, quiet week.
So that contract has done, that term has done absolutely nothing, which means that the liquidity providers are quite happy with the way they have it priced back there. All the action is in the front end of the curve. Again, I think this is where VXX is most interesting to me as a product, because there's a ton of potential decay. You're still in zone 3. VIX can still drop. So the futures, those percentage moves in futures are relatively big, and they can drive VXX into the floor. Like personally, the vol comes down in the vol in VXX options itself, and the future curve. VXX is a great generator of money on the downside at this point. It also generates stuff to buy protective options if you you're in the vol trade club. So a really, really good time to hate VXX and use that like not misplaced hatred at VXX, but just knowing that it's just going to have the hardest time doing anything useful in the short term. So there's a lot. I would just say the interesting thing about the futures is huge potential downside in them. Just even going to the 16 handle. I mean, because that's 5 full points for June right now, which is an enormous amount. Relative. That's 25%. I mean, VXX would be down 10 more bucks. I know it's hard to believe, but that's kind of how that product works. Palookaville. So as quick as it went up, we could see it go down again.
Yeah, just on the curve. I mean, it was interesting to me on Wednesday also that you never quite got to that backwardation levels. So the curve seemed to really just have almost like a parallel shift higher in a way from quick observations. But you still have this contango shape that's the roll down plays are still there. All that stuff. I mean, that to the point of VXX monetizing as it moves lower. And then we I just want to mention something too on the spikes futures curve. We had some volume in the our first trades in the longer dated, the 3rd and 4th month. That happened this week, and we've seen a general decent pickup in the volumes overall. As we mentioned on the show in the past, we have that incentive program going on right now for the liquidity providers, and then anybody else trading the product. There's no exchange fees, so it's seen a bit of a pickup. Not quite where we want to be, but it's very, very optimistic, and it's been good to see. We thank everybody getting involved.
Sounds like those incentive programs are having a bit of an effect there, Tom.
Yeah, it definitely helps. And it's it motivates people.
Well, let's see what kind of motivation they had out here in the options front. Let's start in the land of spikes. Listeners, looks like some more paper hitting the tape. We talked last week about some interesting verticals and some weird kickers kind of floating out there. They're still out there. A little bit more paper on the tape this week. Looks like we got, let's break down let's go top 7. Why not? Let's have fun here. Let's start with May 40 call. That's the weird one I talked about last week. There's a weird kind of aberrant 500 lot that's hanging out there. It seemed like someone threw in a short 500 lot of the May 40s as a kicker. As I recall, we priced it up last week. I do believe they may have sold those for a nickel, which makes it even more dubious why you want to have that just sort of Damocles poised over your position. We've seen recently just how aggressively vol can outperform. I'm not saying it's rational to want to buy those, but just dumping those for a nickel, if that's indeed what they did, that to me That brings the old risk management side of my market making brain that kind of puts the hairs on the back of my neck, makes them stand up. Then we got kind of ties for the next couple. We got number 6. We got 1,000 of the July 50s. That's a new position opening up this week. Some more upside going up out there in Spikes land this week. Kind of interesting. Number 5, got 1,000 as well of the June 25 puts. So back to the dark side. Number 4, we're stepping up again to 1,500 of the June 50s. So 50 strike, pretty active out here in Spikes over the past couple of weeks. Number 3, 1,500 as well of the May 28s. Back to number 2, 1,500 of the May 23s. And rounding out our top positions here in Spikes land, May 21 puts. Tom, were you watching this trade that went up last week? I know the Julys went up for 1,000 times this week, 50s. But am I right on that? Looks like they sold those May 40s for a nickel against, I believe it was a vertical or risk reversal they had done the puts against. But either way, kind of scary. And if you have any color you want to shed on that, or even on these July 50s, have at it, sir.
No real color on the Mays. I didn't really look closely at that one, but the Julys caught my eye this week just because, to your point, it was usually seeing call buyers, but as I said earlier, with those look like to be a sale, and with the vols and vol levels where they were on that day, I think selling that option probably made sense for that client out there. It's probably maybe he's monetizing some other position, or just it wasn't closing it out, but it was an opening position, it looked like. But it seemed like the timing was right for that type of trade.
I am waiting for our friend. We got low enough, maybe not right now, maybe we'll get low enough again, but we were getting low enough again where maybe the old 1x2 guy out there who was playing a lot about a year ago, right before the pandemic, in Spikes, and probably made a fair amount of money. Maybe he made enough. Maybe he doesn't need to come back. I don't know. But that short 1, long 2 worked out pretty well. Might be an interesting environment for something like that again these days. I don't know. You have to be pretty judicious with your strikes, though. As the Rock Lobster said, we're not getting up to those extreme levels, which would really make those short 1x2s pay off. You're just hitting that short strike, and it could be dangerous. But fascinating times afoot out here. Let's see what all this fascination is doing from a VIX options perspective. How long, listeners, have we been saying VIX options? They're anemic. They're kind of dwindling. The ADV is shrinking. We got down below 500,000 contracts. Well, it's ticking up again. You might imagine this week putting a little bit of numbers, a little bit of volume, a little bit of paper on the board this week. ADV back up about 55,000 contracts, over 500,000 again, up to 543,000. So that's more respectable than it has been of late. Today, some serious numbers going up. 706,000 contracts already on the tape. I just ran it again a few minutes ago. They already had gapped up. It was 614 a few minutes before that. Gapped up almost another 100,000 just in the span of a few minutes. So things are hot and heavy out there in VIX land right now for obvious reasons. Let's break down the top 10 sizable positions out here. The top 10 in VIX land. Let's see. We went last week. It was 70-30 puts over calls. This week it is 80-20. So only 2 calls in our top 10. I bet you can guess what they are, listeners. I'll give you a hint. The same as they were last week and the week before. That one size vertical is still kind of dominating everything. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Number 10. Size positions in VIX land. Cost you 140,000 contracts to break into the top 10 in VIX. That's not bad. It's respectable, but it certainly isn't that high for VIX. That gets you to the May 21 puts. Again, it's all puts till the top, listeners. Number 9, 144,000 of the May 20 puts. Number 8, 149,000 of the June 16 puts. Number 7, $1.57 of the May 16 puts. A little bit of a theme here. Number 6, June 17 puts. Got 158,000 of those. Number 5, 161,000 of the May 17 puts. So a little bit of love for the 17 strike as well across the board, May and June. Number 4, all the way up to number 4, still not up to 200,000, which is kind of interesting. 183,000 of the June 15 puts. The way we're going, those could be in the money today. Number 3, 197,000 of the May 18 puts. Again, you see a bit of a narrative here. Then we get to the top 2, which are pretty much the same position. We've got 249,000 of the July 40s. And number 1, a little over 250,000, about 257,000 of the July 25-40. That's kind of interesting, Mr. Rock Lobster, because before we get to breaking down the week's activity, this is one of the few size upside positions we had seen. There was another one, number 3 last week. I forget the strike. Those appear to have been taken off. But our friend here in the size July vertical, didn't really do anything with it this week. He didn't pare it down. He didn't take any of it off. So clearly, he's still waiting for a little bit more pop. Does that surprise you, Mr. Rock Lobster, that he didn't at least take a little bit off, take a nibble when things were looking juicy earlier this week, sir?
Well, I wonder how much the July future actually moved for that person. So right now it's trading 23, and 2 days ago, let's say Wednesday was at the peak, right? Let's take a look. So that July future, he got a couple of bucks. So it's trading 23 or so. They actually got $3. So let's say on the 25.40, what's the delta on that trade? Probably, what is that, a 20 delta contract, 20 delta spread tops. So he got 60 cents on his spreads. So,
not the sexiest.
It's kissing your sister when you're 50-point spread.
You sell 10,000. What do you always say? It pays for your girlfriend's Ferrari, right? That's your favorite metric of success.
You have to be practical. You have to be practical with these guys swinging the big VIX contracts. So I'm sure we'll get all kinds of hate mail for that, but we try to be slightly funny here if we can. But yeah, I don't think they got the move. You don't buy the July 25. You don't buy the 20 was the 25, 40, or 45 spread, and you get the VIX in 27. It's just not. It moves things. I mean, you could sell some stuff, maybe generate some dollars for the balance of the position, but it's not enough to really make you any money. So it's enough to get you just a little excited. And to be honest, if I was holding those, I wouldn't have sold them either, because I thought we would see the 30 handle the next day. It didn't stop me from taking profits, but that's the difference between when you trade VIX. If you trade that 3 or 4 month contract out there versus trading the 1 month, like the reality is the action's in the 1 month. I think that's why 50 Cent was always, he never went more than 60 days out, because he wanted that really bouncy contract when he needed it, or she needed. I think it was a he. And of course, he had probably the trade of the century, at least in VIX, where they close those things. So. That's another thing. When you're trading the vol products, the term is really important by how much gamma and how much pitch those options have, where they could really just blow up for you. So anyway, it's something to keep in mind for all you rookie vol traders out there.
You know what it wasn't insufficient for? It was our friend on the May 60s. That was the number 3 open position last week, Mr. Rock Lobster. The 165,000 of those are off the board this week. So our friend in the May 60s got the hell out of Dodge while the getting was good. I'll have to go look and see if I can find what day he took those off. But those are now gone, listeners, which is kind of interesting out here. So there were, like I said, 3 sizable call positions. Now we're down to 2, and then there were 2. And it's all July verticals. And the Rock Lobster's right. The middle portion of the curve had a bit of a boost. I won't use his incestuous description for what it was, but it wasn't the most exciting of things out there. Let's see what's exciting from an overall VIX options perspective. Like we said, some paper to parse this week, which is nice. Today, 706,000 contracts on the tape as of a few minutes. Actually, that was a little bit earlier. Let's see. I'm going to pull it up again. Let's just see if any more. 724,000. So it has calmed down a little bit out there, but still pretty active, all things considered, in VIX land. The number one, the most active contract out there today in VIX right now, listeners, the May 19 puts. I wonder why that could be. 70,000 of those bad boys on the tape today, followed by 52,000 of the May 18 puts. I'm getting a theme here. Number 3, 42,000 of the May 20 puts. Number 4, 37,000 of the May 21 puts. You see where I'm going? Oh, actually, I found a call. Number 5, 35,000 of the May 20 calls, and probably those are mostly closing. But interesting stuff here, nonetheless. Interesting. Yesterday, also a very active day, even though we're close to it already today, so might probably going to exceed it, maybe even by the end of the show. 761,000 contracts on the tape yesterday. The most active contract yesterday were the May 30s, 31,000 of those bad boys. Maybe someone like the Rock Lobster was saying, had those on thinking we were going to do a little bit better than we did, and then we're scrambling to get the hell out of Dodge yesterday. Either way, 31,000 of the May 30 is going up yesterday, followed by number 2, 29, almost 30,000 of the May 35. So maybe there was a bit of some vertical action. Those numbers pretty similar there as well. Number 3, 29,500 of the July 20 puts. Going back out to July. Number 4, 28, almost 29,000 of the June 21 puts. And round out the top 5 yesterday, about 27,000 of the June 16 puts. Wednesday was the big dog day. Actually, we had 2 days this week, listeners, with the M attached to them. So broke the million 2 times this week, including Wednesday. That was the big dog. 1.66 million contracts on the tape. That's what we're used to in the old days of VIX. That's what we've been looking forward to for a while. Back in action again today. The most active contract in that palooza of paper out there, 110,000 of the June 60s. June 60s. Maybe our friend is reopening out there. I'll have to go look and see what that was about. And then number 2, the June 50s. Looks like a bit of a vertical. 97,000 of those as well. So June 50s and 60s. Number 1 and number 2 out there on Wednesday. Number 3, 73,000 of the May doubles, aka 55 calls. Number 4, 69, almost 70,000 of the May 65 calls. And rounding out the top 5 on the most active day we've seen in quite some time, 52,000 almost exactly of the June 18 puts. So there were some puts making the top 10 on Wednesday. Remember, Wednesday was that second leg of the sell-off that really kind of spooked everybody and made people think, oh, wait a minute, this is really it. Look out below. Look out 4,000. Look out 30 in the VIX. And crazy day afoot. Tuesday, of course, was the day when the madness really kicked off. 1.04 million contracts on the tape there as well. So just making it to the 1M mark. The most active contract on Tuesday, 91,000 of the May 18 puts. That's interesting. Puts dominating the tape. Maybe some folks scrambling to get the hell out of Dodge when they thought that 18 strike wasn't coming back for a while. Number 2, about 38,000 of the SEP 25 calls. It's the first SEP we've seen in a while. Tuesday was a lot of SEP. Interesting. Number 3, 36,000, easy for me to say, of the SEP 30 calls were number 3. Number 4, 36,000 as well of the SEP 35. So it looks like a little bit of some vertical action there, followed by almost 36,000 of the SEP 40. So maybe a bit of a funky 3-way. It's not a fly because it's not 1 by 2 by 1. Either way, that's our action, mostly calls, except for the most active one on Tuesday being puts. Monday, of course, was a decently active day, 544,000. So that was exceeding the ADV for that day as well because the ADV was under 500,000 then. The most active contract on Monday, 36,000 of the SEP 40s. Number 2, 36,000 as well of the SEP 30s. So it looks like maybe some more vertical action there. Number 3, 35, almost 36,000 of the SEP 25s. Number 4, 35,000 as well of the SEP 35s. And rounding out the top 5, May 30s out here. Mr. Rocklops, I know it's kind of like asking you to parse the individual droplets of a hurricane, but that said, any interesting paper come across your radar out here in VIXland this week, sir?
I think mostly it was just the people diving into puts yesterday. That was the biggest one. Actually, Mark and I was doing the show. You could buy the 20 puts all you wanted yesterday in VIX, all you wanted for 35 cents. You could buy I think his trade idea was the 20 puts for 35 cents, and you could get a 25, 32, 40 fly for 60 cents. So, I mean, just the puts are worth $1.50 alone today. So, like a lot of the more VIX moves, the more interesting the pricing is. I'm a firm believer in that as far as fun. But yeah, that's like the puts definitely caught my attention yesterday, and I did add some. So that's what I thought. The June 20 puts got as low as 105, I think, or $1 yesterday. So those were I was kind of on the 20 handle. And all those puts were relatively inexpensive considering we were just trading 16. Again, always looking for every time VIX goes up, I look for things to go down again. So the 20 handle was definitely that just drew my eye as far as cost and risk reward and stuff like that. Some easy to double your money on those puts.
Yeah, those are looking pretty good right now. The upside flies are kind of interesting, too, because you're right. These calls up here are so juicy. You can't just come out right and buy some upside in VIX or any of these vol products anymore. You gotta be judicious about your flies and your verticals out here. So interesting stuff afoot. Let's see if interesting stuff is afoot out here in the product all of you folks love to fade. Looks like it just broke the 39 handle 38.95 as we speak for VXX listeners. It was at 39.40 coming into the start of the show. That's up about 1.7 handles. Obviously, giving up almost a half a point of that now, down to a little north of 1 point from where it was this time a week ago. With this VXX, this thing is moving like a biotech these days. This is crazy town. We were down to 36 towards the end of last week and then off to the mid 40s. Let's see how high. I think it was look out above for a while there, which is not something we say very often in VXX. Yeah, 49 actually. I was 49.44. So you're threatening a 50 handle in VXX listeners. And now we're back below the 40 handle. This thing freaking moves, I think, is the technical term. Right now, today, about 214,000 contracts on the tape. May not sound like a lot because this name had an ADV of north of 400,000 not too long ago. But given these days how anemic it has been, certainly pre and post split, that's actually decent paper. The ADV is about 197. That's up about 1,000. So the ADV hasn't really budged this week. I think a lot of that still may be some of these lingering symbology issues out here that are driving people crazy out here in VXX land. Let's break down the top 10 really quickly. By the way, I pulled these off of one of my favorite platforms over there, Trade Alert. They still do them in the pre kind of split adjusted, which is why the strikes are funky. All right, number 10, 22,000 of the May 11 puts. Number 9, 23, almost 24,000 of the SEP 9 puts. Number 8, 24,000 of the June 20 calls. Number 7, 28,000 of the June 9 puts. Number 6, 29,000 of the May 11 calls. Number 5, 30K, almost 31K of the June 11s. Number 4, 31,000 of the May 9 puts. Number 3, 32,000 of the SEP 10 calls. And rounding out the top 2 here, we got 37,000 of the May 10 puts and 45, almost 46,000 of the May 12 calls. Obviously, if that's in the VXX one, I know it's a little confusing. That's probably why a lot of people are still having problems accessing or finding their liquidity out here. Maybe some of the brokers are still having a hard time disseminating the new split adjusted VXX, which is probably why we're seeing so little paper still out there in VXX. A week like this, we should have seen numbers back up in the 400K level like it used to do, and we're just not seeing it. Let's look at the top trades here today for VXX, see if anything crazy is lighting it up. The most active contract out here today, listeners, May 39 puts going out today on the 14th. Those have 19,000 contracts here, followed by number 2, 9,000 of the June 33 puts, and 9,000 as well of the May 38 puts, followed by 6,000 for number 4 of the May 40 puts, and rounding out the top 5 in VXX today, 6,100 of the SEP 35 puts. Mr. Rock Lobster, this one has been moving and shaking. Have you been playing, and you and your crazies been playing in VXX this week, or have you just been glued to just the VIX and the mothership this week, sir?
No. When the curve starts to get a little flat, that's when the VXX gets me excited on the upside. So yes, I did. I played. I dumped some call spreads, and probably by the end of the show, I'm going to get rid of my puts and say thank you very much to the lovely product that is reliably crappy, but can be oh so fantastic sometimes. So, so VXX, yeah, we were playing. I think it makes a great trade as the curve flattens because proportional, like you just said, it moves like wildfire. So you don't get many products that can predictably move as fast as VXX can move when the wall jumps. So most of the time though, it kind of sucks and goes down. But when it doesn't, especially when it's at a larger number now, remember those proportional moves for the futures they own really can just jam it out of sight for movement, which is kind of fun. But you got to know that. You got to know what's going to happen. So yes, the short answer is yes, the strangly action was quite good in VXX, and now it's back on its way to Palookaville unless something awful happens this weekend. Yes,
strangling. It was a good product to strangle this week. Definitely. UVXY up a little bit so far this week, up about 1.15. Let's see how much participation UVXY had on our upside crazy madness palooza here this week. Let's see. We got up to about 6.25. So I had a nice little pop there for a little bit. Did that drive some paper? A bit. Let's see. The ADV is up 291,000 right now. So that's up about 63,000 from last show. So that's a little bit more action out here in UVXY. I guess folks aren't just sitting back and waiting for the split anymore. We're at about a 435 as of a few minutes ago. It's up about 0.15 or so from our last show. And again, that's the ADV is 291,000 today, 330,000. So some decent paper out there in UVXY. Number one out here, most active contract today, 39,000 of the May 4.5 puts, followed by about 23,000 of the May 4.5 calls. So not surprising, hanging out that 4.5 strike. That's what's trading today. Those are going out today, by the way. Those are the weeklies expiring on the 14th. Number three, 18,000 of the May 4.5 puts expiring next week. Number four, 17,000 of the May 4 puts also expiring next week. And rounding out the top five here, we've got almost 17,000 of the May 5 puts expiring today. Let's hold off on the top five because it's pretty much very similar. Top position out here right now, 45,700 of the June 5 calls out there, if you're wondering, listener. So going out to June a little bit in UVXY. I think we had one that was closing. Yeah, last week the top position was the May 4.5s expiring last week on the 7th. That's what I was looking for in the UXX. And it was almost 70,000 of those bad boys. So those have gone the way of the dodo. Unfortunately, our friend, if he was long those, he missed the big run-up in UVXY by less than a week, couple of days. So, again, that shows that timing is everything out there in the options landscape. Mr. Rock Lobster, anything with your crazies going on in UVXY this week, sir?
You know what? We haven't been looking at UVXY anymore. Just we're waiting for it to split again so we can get crazy. So what was we had all this action in UVXY went from $5 to $6.50 or something like that. And all the option prices are about $1 jillion. So I would say waiting until UVXY gets a little bit more interesting to trade. But it was trading 403 when the ball was 0, and now it's trading 432. So, I mean, it is 8% higher, but I guess it got to $6, so $6.50. So there was some excitement there. I mean, that is a 50% move. So, let's look at the option prices just for fun. Let's say the June 5.5 puts were 40 cents. So yeah, there was some money to be made in that thing, but I don't look at it that much until it resplits because then it gets more interesting. But I have to say it was a little bit off my radar, to be honest.
Yeah, I do feel bad for this guy who had nearly 70,000 of the May 4.5s that went out last Friday. He was like 3 sessions away, not even from gold in them thar hills. Again, listeners, that's why we say the term is all out here in vol and options trading. Speaking of vol trading this week, a lot of single name vol going on this week from an earnings perspective. I know it's sometimes hard to see when everything's exploding and it's all macro vol going on out there, but there were a lot of big names popping off. You can find, of course, the reports for yourselves. You know where to go, theoptionsinsider.com. Click on the options news and articles tab. We broke down a lot of the hot ones already this week on the option block on Monday and on Thursday, but some big names out there. We had Bumble. We had Poshmark. We had Palantir. That's another big one this week. Marriott, Duke Energy, Roblox. And then, of course, Disney after the bell yesterday. Heard they were a little bit down. Not surprising on the Disney Plus. I mean, everyone already has it at this point, right? So how many people can they add? But yeah, Disney hurting on that. But there are other parts of their business that have done nothing for the better part of the past year, like movies and parks starting to come to life again. So a little bit of a give and take out there. Airbnb and Alibaba and Coinbase. Yes, Coinbase is another interesting one. Everyone's now obsessed. They moved away from Bitcoin because Musk has killed that, apparently. But now he's talking about Doge. So everyone's talking about Doge out there today. By the way, let's see. Diz off about 4.25 today, trading down to 174.13. So you guys can find those move results reports for yourselves. You know where to go, theoptionsinsider.com. Now it's time to see what you folks have on the brain. A little bit of your volatility voicemail.
It's time to share your thoughts and opinions with your fellow volatility traders. It's time to check the volatility voicemail. Make your voice heard by dialing 779-669-4VOL. Posting a comment on the optionsinsider.com, sending an email to questions@theoptionsinsider.com, or posting your questions to twitter.com/options. or facebook.com/theoptionsinsider.
All right, everybody. See, if you wait long enough in the options market and the volatility market, things come back to you because, as is often the case, we like to ask you guys questions as well as you guys asking us questions sometimes. Turn the spotlight back on you. We did that at the start of the week when we asked you, hey, markets are hovering at all-time highs. Volatility was trending lower. That was the case on Monday. Not so much for the rest of the week, but now it's back again. Just had to wait a little bit. So our poll is savvy yet again. We ask you, in this environment, vol trending lower, markets trending higher, what is your go-to strategy right now? And of course, if you have others, I know a lot of you do, hit us up with your alternatives out here. We gave you 4 very basic choices: buying calls, buying puts, covered calls, or short puts. Mr. Tom, we'll start with you, sir. If you have a vote you want to weigh in, have at it. But more importantly, what do you think our audience is voting for in this environment, sir?
I would think they're voting for the buy puts. That would be my vote for the audience. And, kind of, I guess in this environment would be where I would be leaning as well.
Kind of hard to fault that, given how frothy and top-heavy we are out there in the broad indices. Mr. Rock Lobster, I think you talked about this a little bit yesterday. Have you had time to reconsider? Because yesterday I think you were in the buying calls camp, were you not?
I was in the buying calls camp. I have to say, I think I'm in the selling puts camp, to be honest. But I think our listeners are jumping on the buying calls camp still.
It's close. It was number 2 yesterday. It is still number 2 today. Buying puts, Tom's choice, is the winner right now with 39.5% of the vote. 27. Actually, I take it back. Covered calls is now number 2. Has just moved up, usurping buying calls. Covered calls number 2, 28.9%. Number 3, buying calls, 27.6%. The Rock Lobster's choice, selling puts, getting no love, only 3.9%. So everyone and their mother afraid to sell some puts right now in this environment. If you haven't voted yet, listeners, get over there while the getting's good. Only about 2 hours left. I'm not sure if it'll still be live by the time the podcast goes out on the network, listeners. So if you're listening live and you haven't voted, get out there at Options. You should make a habit of checking us out if you haven't already throughout the week at Options. We have a lot of great content, obviously, throughout the week, every day, but also there's usually polls there pinned for you folks to get at it out there. Let's see. Let's go to this one really quick. GameStop questions are legion. let's go to this one from Juval $. I like this. He says, just discovered the show and have been learning a ton. Well, thank you, Juval, and everyone else out there in the same camp. I know we have a lot of new listeners these days. He says, thanks for all that you do. Well, thanks for listening. He goes on to write, I know that you've mentioned multiple times about VIX and spikes moving quickly and aggressively up over short time spans. Looks like we're seeing that again this week. I'm a relatively new vol trader. Is this an argument that we should all be carrying some upside in VIX or spike right now? Maybe 20 or 25 calls a few months out. Just have to be quick on the trigger finger when it's time to sell. Or is that just wasted money? Well, Mr. Rock Lobster, we were just talking about this. You had a strangle on in VXX, but usually if you have this upside on in these products, he is correct. You have to be pretty deft on the trigger finger when it's time to get the heck out of Dodge. Given where we are right now, I know you just kind of talk about taking off your verticals. Have you counseling any of your crazies in the pit chat, your mentees, to have a little bit of upside in their back pockets for the rainy days, sir, in VIX or spikes or any other vol products, sir?
Well, I'm almost always long some upside. But when it flies, you got to take it. My rule generally is I like to take 80 to 90% if I get a big move, and then you just leave 10% on. You just don't care. So that way, if you get something crazy, you have to be realistic. A year like last year only happens once every 10 years. Mostly you get the moves to like the mid 20s, high 20s, and then they're done. So that's just the nature of how it trades. So I think that's a great place to take a lot of money. And as the Thompson brothers famously said, VIX pays above 20 and below 16, and kind of in between those two places is kind of Palookaville. So just be mindful when you're in zone 4 that your job is to take your money. So usually I just find a relative percentage of dollars that I have in the position, and just make sure I take some of that money out if I can.
All right, now it's time to see how much money is coming out of our prognostications. It is time for the crystal ball.
It's time to peer into the future and reveal what the volatility gods hold in store. It's time to look into the crystal ball.
All right, this is another one where if the show was a little bit later in the day, maybe our prognostications would look a little better because the vol is coming off pretty aggressively. As we wrap up the show here, we're seeing spikes at about a 1981. So getting a little bit of his juice back. It was 19.5 at the start of the show. So getting about a third of a point back. And we have VIX cash at about a 19.25 or so. So again, we're well off. I was the closest. I put closest in air quotes. I was 2 points away on VIX because I was 17.25. And I was obviously a little more than that, about 2.5 points, a little more on spikes out there. It's about a 1975 now up to a 1981. So yeah, not exactly a winner chicken dinner. Mr. Meatball was feeling a lot lower. He was feeling 16. And it was looking good. Both of these were looking good until they weren't. I think we had some listeners chiming in. Actually, had a listener in the chat who was at a similar level, about 19 last week as well. So that proves how difficult this is to do week in, week out, listeners. I've said it before. I'll say it again. Profiling where and when the spike will come, pun intended, and how long it will last is really the challenge these days. So a lot of interesting stuff. So that means there are no winners on the show last week. So I will be a charitable folk and allow either of you two to go first. Let's go with Tom, because he hasn't been on the show in a while. Mr. Tom, what are your feelings for where spikes and or VIX will be at this time next week?
I thought a little bit lower, like a 1905 in the spikes next Friday.
1905. Okay, I like it. Mr. Rock Lobster, same question for you, sir. What are you feeling for this time next week from a vol perspective?
That's so we're talking spikes. I'm feeling a little lower. The problem is I'm feeling like 1695, or for spikes, I'm going to say, like 1699 or 40. That's the problem. I'm going to go with 16 for spikes. I'll go 1699, and I'm going to do the same for VIX, 1699. There you go.
1699 for you, Tom. 19 up. Usually I feel like I have a pretty good handle on where things are going to be coming week. Doesn't mean it's always right, but at least I have a good prognostication in my head. This week, not so much. I don't really have a good feel for where things are going to be this time next week. I'm kind of up in the air. I'm kind of feeling what Rock Lobster is saying. It could be a 16. It could be 35. We have a lot of range to play with this week. If past is prologue, listeners, we will see more of this erosion coming in, of all other things being equal. That should play out, and we should be lower this time next week. But again, these systemic shocks that happen almost like clockwork now, when will they come? How aggressively will they come in? And how long will they last? These are the questions we have to factor in. If the sell-off happens all week, and then Yellen announces something crazy right before showtime next week, all bets are off. And if it happens in the beginning of the week and then we erode back down, it looks good. So it's one of these crazy things, listeners. So yeah, we're coming in right now. We're at about a 19.25 and 1975 to 80 in spikes. Whew, I'm trying to buy myself some time here, listeners. Tell you what, I'm gonna go lower, but not a ton. I'm going to say 1855 for this time next week. But of course, if we have the crazy pop and we're at a 24 this time next week, not going to look askance at it either. Oh, we got a listener chiming in on the live. He's 1865. He's a very smart man. He's very close to me. I can always tell when a listener is very intelligent because their prognostication pretty close to mine. Oh, he's at a 19.25 here in the spikes as well. You guys have your other prognostications. Hit us up. You know where to find us. You can do it in the live chat like he did, or you can go on the social media or via email. You want to play along in the crystal ball, hit us up. Have at us. We love to hear from you. You can see how difficult this game is week after week. Unfortunately, that's all the time we have for the volatility views today. But before we go, let's go back around the horn. Tom, we were so busy here on the show, so much vol to talk about. We didn't even have a chance to talk about some of the new cool stuff. In fact, we had this comment here in the vol voicemail didn't get to from LTC saying, I love the show and the shift search tool. Very cool. Tom, he is not alone. A lot of people are saying that they love the shift search. I know you guys have been doing some updates on that. What's the latest in the land of all things shift search, sir?
Well, I think John Smong introduced on the show a few weeks back, but since then the pickup's been very good, and I think they have like 10,000 subscribers now. And they put out some TikTok video. It supposedly has like 50,000 views on it, so it's getting a lot of interest. And they're able to roll out new releases quite quickly. So they're getting a lot of user feedback and hopefully implementing a lot of those new features, as things move on. But it's a pretty cool tool. I've shared it with a bunch of people too, at the sell side and the banks, and they like it to look up, what's trading, and it's free.
You can't beat the price. And Tom, if folks want to go to check it out for themselves, where should they go? What should they do?
It's on MIAX.shiftsearch.com. And you should see it there.
Yes, MIAX.shiftsearch.com. I talked to those guys a week or so ago, and they're adding new updates pretty much weekly. Every Friday is their update cycle. So keep checking it out. And what they were telling me, there's a lot of cool stuff on the horizon. They're trying to create almost a natural language search. You can go there and say, what are these stocks looking like versus these ones? Or what are these options? And just type it in how you would think about it. And it should, hopefully, if it works, bring up the data you want. Right now, it's got great unusual activity and great vol and everything else you can check out. And again, you can't beat the price. It's all free, and there's more stuff coming week after week. So check it out, MIAX.shiftsearch.com. You know where to go, of course, for all the data, MIAXoptions.com/spikes. That'll get you the spikes quotes, historical press releases. You want to see new products coming out, that's where you go. You want to see the futures of the Viking and all that kind of fun stuff. It's all there on the press releases. Of course, even a link to a cool little show called Volatility Views. What more could you possibly ask for from a volatility-oriented destination? And you know where to go to learn more about execution services and trading technology. Well, of course, it's matrixexecutions.com. Of course, while you're at it, give them a follow on the old Twitters as well. They're just MatrixEX Tech. All one word. Let them know you listen to them on Vol Views here. They'll love to hear from you. And of course, Mr. Rock Lobster. A lot of action going on in the pit chat this week. So if folks want to join the fun, sling some vol, where should they go? What should they do?
Go on over to optionpit.com if you want to come to my cool and very, very secret vol trading club, where we're racking up an impressive group of wins this year, I have to say. Vol up, vol down, vol be damned. Go check it out. And Mark's Vol Edge product as well. Both doing great this year. So yeah, come on over, check it out. You want to see how to trade these vol product things, understand how they work. It's the key. If you understand how they work, then you have a better chance of trading them. So that is an Option Pit cornerstone, and feel free to come on over and get your learning on.
Yes, I'm looking here in our chat. Mr. Unlimited says the Shift Search added a meme section. It's great. Yes, I may be partly to blame for that. I may have suggested that to them. So check that out over there at the Shift Search tool. Cool new stuff all the time. And on behalf of the folks over there in MIAX and all the folks in Matrix and the Rock Lobster and indeed myself, I want to thank all of you out there for downloading, streaming, subscribing, for listening live, for sending in so many great questions and comments. Keep them coming. Vote in our polls. We'll see you back again on Monday for the option block, all the way through till Friday. Another episode of Volatility Views.
Volatility Views is brought to you by MIAX, one of the fastest, most efficient trading platforms in the world. MIAX is proud to bring you Spikes Volatility products. Spikes options and futures are traded on the Spikes Volatility Index, SPIKE, offering pinpoint accuracy, radically faster dissemination, and a highly transparent settlement auction, all for ultra-low exchange fees. It's Volatility reimagined. Learn more about spikes at MIAXoptions.com/spikes. Options and futures involve risk and are not suitable for all investors. The statements made are provided for informational purposes only and should not be relied on for financial or legal advice. Volatility Views is also brought to you by Matrix Executions, LLC, an agency broker-dealer focused on best execution and trading workflow automation. A technology-driven firm, Matrix is led by trading pioneers with decades of experience designing and building best-in-class solutions for options markets. Matrix connects to all domestic exchange venues and multiple international exchanges and serves both institutional and individual clients. For more information on Matrix Executions, LLC, please visit matrixexecutions.com. You're listening to the Options Insider Radio Network, the home of the Options Podcast. For more quality options programs, visit theoptionsinsider.com or search for Options Insider Radio Network in your podcast provider of choice. Listeners can also access all of our programming through our mobile app available in the iTunes and Google Play stores. Select programs are also available via live stream at mixlr.com/options-insider. That's mixlr.com/options-insider. Don't forget to follow along with your favorite programs and submit your own questions for the hosts at twitter.com/options, stocktwits.com/options, facebook.com/theoptionsinsider, or via questions at theoptionsinsider.com.